Today, I think you need to know your role. Hello everybody, I'm Roadblock and this is a Raid Shadow Legends video. I'm laughing because I think my intro is a little cheesy. I don't know, I had this idea of like The Rock being like, know your role and shut your mouth. I'm a wrestling fan, I don't know if I talk about that much, but I wanted to talk about roles in Raid Shadow Legends because the game doesn't really give you a pretty good description of roles in the game. So, for example, if you wanted to divvy up by roles... Oh, here it is. Okay, I knew it was in here. I've seen it 1,000 times. Attack, defense, HP, and support. But these don't really describe everything in the scope of Raid Shadow Legends, and I wanted to take some time to really divvy it up. Now, I gave a little bit of thought to this. I do have a little note here on the side, but of kind of the roles. Now, this is going to be a series that I want to do. Past series like this, like the Mastery series, didn't do very well, but I do want to try and attack this because I want to make sure that players are informed. I see this all the time when I do takeovers. I haven't done any in a couple months, I know, but when I do takeovers, people don't really understand the roles that champions are designed to play. Furthermore, listen up, I just got a new promo link that you can use to follow along with me on my latest free-to-play adventure and get a free Elenaril as well as 3 more powerful epics as you level up. Here's how to do it. Log out of Plarium Play and uninstall. Click the link in the description and register with a brand new email. Launch Raid and complete the tutorial. Go to your inbox and claim your first champ. Don't miss out on your chance to get Elenaril right after signing up, as well as Fayne, Uugo, and Tagoar as you progress through Raid. Click on my link right now and let's crush this together. People that apply to the clan, people that want to be a part of it, are using champions in a way that just doesn't always make sense. And it's important to understand what the roles are and how those roles intermingle to create very beneficial special champions that can do multiple roles all at once. And I think that's important. So right now, and I want you guys in the comments to tell me if you think that there's a role that I'm forgetting. Please let me know. I may disagree with you and not include it, but if you put something in there, I'm going to be like, okay, cool, yeah, you know what, I didn't think about that, let me throw that in there. But at the time of this episode, this recording, I've got Nuker, debuffer, boss killer, healer, support, booster, like a turn meter booster, poison, burn, and bomb, and then a control champion. So I'm not going to, each one of those categories I think is going to be their own episode because I could talk forever about nukers. In today's episode, I want to give a brief overview of what I believe constitutes each role, not necessarily specific champions, but just a general concept behind it. And then I'll do a bigger, deeper dive. So just as an example for you guys for a future episode, I might say, okay, a nuker is going to be somebody based on what I have here, because I have boss killer separate. So a nuker is going to be somebody that maybe does wave clear, arena damage, right? You're looking for damage against champions, but maybe not always good damage against bosses. Some champions fall into this, they fall into both categories. There are champions who are nukers and boss killers. Marius, for example, is an obvious one, but then you have some champions that are boss killers, but not nukers, right? So you have like a Chrysia and Nuke. So to just to differentiate them a little bit, and that's kind of what we're looking for. So when I'm talking a nuker, I'm talking about somebody that is going to do damage to enemies, and you're looking for ignore defense. You're looking for increase of their main stat. So if it's a PvP nuker, you might be looking for increased defense. If it's an attack-based nuker, you might be looking for increased attack, right? So that's kind of what I'm talking about when I say nuker. Now, when I say debuffer, well, that kind of means a lot. And that's why I separated debuffers from something like turn meter boosters and control, and also separated them from poison, burn, and bomb champions. And I kind of threw those all together because I feel like they're similar in what they're trying to do, with a few notable exceptions that we'll talk about when I get to them. But for debuffer, I'm mostly talking about champions that are going to be placing the majority of the debuffs that you're looking for in any given run. A good example for a debuffer is going to be Lydia, right? Lydia brings your decreased defense and weaken. She's not doing direct damage, and she's not really bringing anything in her kit that does damage, but she is essential to the team doing damage. Likewise, I would say the same thing with Lamasu, where she brings block buffs and decreased speed and decreased attack, right? These are debuffs that she's placing, but she doesn't have anything in her kit to do damage, that type of thing, right? So that's kind of what I'm saying when I mean debuffer. How is that different from poison, burn, and bomb? Well, we'll get there. I'm going to go down the list in order. Boss killers are going to be, I've already mentioned some of them, Acrizia and Newt, and then you have your champions like Ninja. Ninja can kind of fall into the realm of both a boss killer and a nuker in some ways, because Ninja can be pretty good in early game arena, but he's not something that I would consider long term. He is going to have his weaknesses and vulnerabilities, so I wouldn't really consider him in that area, but he can do pretty good on wave clear. And I've seen a lot of players, when the Ninja promo code was out, man, ninjas were all over the arena in the early game. When I made that Ninja only free to play, not Ninja only, but I made the Ninja free to play account, and I was seeing ninjas pop up everywhere for good reason. At that time, we were getting him for free, but yeah, it was just something that I noticed. So I would consider him more of a boss killer overall. Then you have healers, and you might be saying healers are just supports. Well, I disagree with you. I think the difference between healers and supports is quite large. And I'm going to say support could be more called a buffer, but that's an entirely different word. So we're going to go with support instead. So healers are going to be those champions whose primary function is to heal your team. They don't get as much play these days, in my opinion, because generally there are better ways to heal your teams, or there are supports who do both. But it did kind of exist at a point in time where there were champions whose sole purpose was just large amounts of healing to keep your team alive. A good example would be Vogoth. Now, yes, does Vogoth bring debuffs? Yes, he does, right? And that's where a lot of these are going to intermingle. But for the most part, when I think of Vogoth, I'm picking somebody who's going to keep this team alive because he heals based on damage received. Another example, and it's mostly epics in this category, but another good example is going to be Doom Priest, who is a healer, but also debuffs, right? But I've seen a lot of people use Doom Priest as a healer. I would say Syl could be considered a bit of a healer. Yes, she brings debuffs and control, but those are low percentages for some of those control features. A Vrask is another really good, just pure healer. The whole concept is he heals 10% of the HP when he inflicts a critical hit. So these were roles that existed back in the day, but I don't think people really utilize them beyond the mid game any longer. I don't know that I would want to bring Vrask over some of my other healing supports. So let's talk about what is a support. So a support to me is going to be somebody that brings buffs that are essential to your team. Now, some of them, like I would say, this Mithrala is a debuffer and a support, in my opinion, as well as a poison champion, right? That's what makes Mithrala so good. She kind of does it all. But you could consider, like, I would consider Androx's base form, right? This base form right here to be a buffer. He brings increased resist, or to be a support, right? Because he brings increased resist, strengthen, and continuous healing. So he's giving you a lot of buffs and helping you prevent getting debuffs in the form of a increased resistance. Then in his alternate form, he's a debuffer. We've got block buffs. We've got decreased resistance, weaken, enfeeble, decreased defense, right? And so it's a very good example of the two different forms there. So a support is something along those lines. More champions that would be supports would be Duchess, right? She's bringing your buffs to your team. She's reviving. That's another key factor of a support. And you could make maybe even a separate subcategory of support for just Reviver, but generally speaking, all they do is revive. I don't think I'm really going to want them. You're going to want them to do more than that. I am not putting Arbiter in this category. I think she's going to be in a category coming up in the term in booster. And some of them could be booster as well, but I would put like Pythion as a support. He cleanses, he places block debuffs, he revives with strengthen, and has a little bit of healing in his kit as well. And I say a little bit, like he was my main healer for a very long time. So it's actually pretty significant. Same thing with Padrig. This is a support, right? You're getting that increased speed, ally attack, right? You could put ally attack as its own group as well, but I would probably put most ally attackers into the category of a support. So then we have your boosters, and this is where I feel like Arbiter kind of falls into. She is a champion whose sole focus is to speed up your team. Yes, she has revive, she has kind of a heal, but she's not a very good healer, and she does have some, you know, control mechanics in her kit, like taking off debuffs potentially, but I'm not usually running her with high accuracy, so this doesn't really land. Likewise with the weaken, right? So another booster who I don't have would be somebody like, and this is where it gets very convoluted, right? Because Siphi does it all, right? So Siphi fills turn meter and puts buffs, right? So she's a support and a booster. And so it gets complicated in there, but I know that a lot of people tend to use her as that speed champion. She has a high base speed of 114, and she can be used in the same way that Arbiter does, while also bringing more benefits to your team than what Arbiter can bring. But to kind of delineate things and make it a little more clear, Loriaka is somebody that is similar in a way to Siphi, but is also a booster, right? This is a pure booster in my opinion. Turn meter fill of 20%, block debuffs, and then they also have some debuff placement, right? So you could even argue maybe control for a little bit for this champion. No, I would go booster, because I feel like their whole kit is kind of centered around boosting your allies. So Siphi is kind of in the middle there. You could lean either way. You could lean support, you could lean booster. Honestly, I think it's really in the middle there. I really can't pick. I know I said earlier I'd put her as a booster. That's the way I see her used more often, but she can really do it all. One of the best champions in the game for my money. Now we have poisons, burns, and bombs. How are these different from debuffers? Well, when it comes to poisons, burns, and bombs, the goal here is, yes, to land your debuffs, but they're landed with the intention of doing damage. And I think that's very important to distinguish that from champions whose primary role is to place debuffs to enhance other champions, if that makes sense. So for Calvalax, as a good example that people are using all over the game right now, Calvalax brings a ton of poisons, and he's looking to do damage with that poison. He's not looking to amplify the rest of your team's output, he's looking to do damage. For burners, you've got Artak. Artak, again, is bringing burns, right? He does also bring decreased attack, so he's also a debuffer, but he's looking to do damage with these burns and activating these burns. Likewise, you could consider somebody like Theodore is another champion that falls into this poisoner category. Yes, they are also a decreased speed champion and a weakened champion, but really, what are you looking for when you say, I want Theodore on my team? He's even a support, right? Because he gives increased speed as well. But at the end of the day, I'm looking to do poison damage with Theodore on my team. That is my primary mindset for him. And then for bomb champions, same thing. I've got Nishak right here. Nishak, again, your sole purpose is to do damage with those bombs. He does bring a decreased attack, which could be useful in an additional role, but what am I looking to get out of him? I'm looking to land those bombs and do a lot of damage with those bombs. So I'm building him in a specific way to not only land debuffs, but also to increase the damage that debuff itself does. And that's why I wanted to separate those into that different category. And then lastly, I have control. So for control champions, we've got two very, very obvious ones that are going to make it pretty simple for, I think, everybody to grasp the concept of, which is Fabian and Armands, right? These are very, very good control champions where you could argue debuffer, but the debuffs, again, rather have a very specific intention of disrupting the enemy team, where a debuffer is trying to boost the efficiency of the rest of the team. Armands and Fabian are trying to disrupt your opponent and make them do less damage or no damage by completely taking control of that team under what you want them to do. So you don't want them to take a turn, they are stunned. You don't want them to use abilities, they are locked out with Fabian. That is what I think of when I say a control champion, because they are controlling the enemy team. But a lot of champions, again, mix and match, right? One of the biggest examples that comes to mind to me for a champion that does it all is Nergigante Archer. And I know this is a frustrating one because we can't get her anymore, and she's one of my favorites. I have 2 of her, and I am so happy that I have her because she does it all. She is a debuffer. She places Hex and Provoke. Oh, Provoke. That's a control ability. She can also stun and decrease speed. Decrease speed is a debuff, in my opinion, and stun is a control ability. Oh, she also heals my entire team when I use her and gives herself accuracy, so she technically is also a buffer, right? So she does everything. That's what makes champions like her so good. Likewise, a champion like Sify that does it all, right? That's what brings these champions up in value. That's what makes them special. And I think a lot of times players view a champion as being something special because a content creator says they are. And I think that's not always the case. I think champions can be special because they can seemingly do it all. Another control example, just to make it so that it's not just Armands and Fabian, is Deacon Armstrong. I view Deacon Armstrong as a control champion. He's also a debuffer, but this ability right here is very powerful in the early stages of the game, especially in Arena, because you're boosting your team and decreasing the enemy team. Now, he's not the only champion that has that, but I think that that's very, very beneficial. And he's another champion that does it all because he can also place decreased defense. And of course, Leech, right? So there are really, really good champions that can do it all. And those are the ones that are going to be those game-changing champions that you're always looking for and trying to get to really empower your team. But I think it's important to understand the differences between them because a lot of players just don't get it. And I see a lot of players who try to use other champions in ways that might make sense on paper, but maybe don't make sense in reality. A great example of that is going to be Arbiter. I see people with large amounts of accuracy on their Arbiter because she has a chance to decrease the duration of enemy buffs. That's okay, but not at the cost of speed. Because in my opinion, my Arbiter, the way I'm using her, is to go first. And so if I'm lowering my speed so that I can bring more accuracy to the table, that's not benefiting me at all. I'm going speed only on my Arbiter. And I see that kind of stuff pretty often. Another example would be something like Thor. So my particular build on Thor actually has quite a bit of accuracy, and that's because the blessing I use on him is Nature's Wrath, which increases the damage inflicted every time they place a debuff, obviously with a cap. But so I do try to get accuracy while also still getting a high amount of attack and a high amount of reasonable amount of speed. He's a little slower than I would like, but that's just the nature of my gear limitation. But I see a lot of people who build Thors with no accuracy, or maybe they over prioritize accuracy. And remember, you only need the accuracy to complete the objective. So if you're doing a lower level of Hydra, you may need a lower level of accuracy. But I feel like I have touched enough on kind of the foundation of this series. Let me know in the comments, are you guys excited for this series? Do you think it's going to be a bust? Do you not really care? Let me know. If you guys aren't really interested in this, then I'm not going to continue and kind of do a deeper dive into those roles. But I think it's very important to differentiate and make it clear for newer players in particular. And one thing I find always in my comments when I make a series like this, even the Mastery series, where players that have been playing for a very, very long time putting in the comments and saying, man, I've been playing for a long time. I never thought about that for this champion before. And so that's why I want to kind of do that deeper dive into things to help out everybody and maybe take a look at a different perspective than what you currently have on your account. So let me know what you guys think. Thank you all for watching. If you're new here, please consider subscribing so you don't miss any follow-up episodes to this series. And I look forward to seeing you all in the next video. Take care.